Ms. Danoff?
Here.
Ms. Kaplan?
Okay. Okay, we're gonna start out public comments. Hearing none. We have some approval for some minutes. These minutes are for June 5th. For approval, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
Before you take a vote on that, one thing I did want to point out is that it doesn't list me as being in attendance.
Oh,
I do believe that I was here. So could we do it to amend to include me?
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Can we do that?
We can.
Okay,
thanks.
consider it done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's one of the little details I slip
Well,
all the
I
time.
actually noticed that, but I didn't remember if you were here or not. I'm so sorry that I don't remember if you were here.
Oh, that's okay. No, I actually never looked to see if I was listed in attendance before, and I just happened to notice, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh,
Yeah, you
I
always
should
are.
probably be listed.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Okay, okay, with that correction.
Mhm.
Ms. Danoff?
Oh, we're taking a vote?
Yes. To approve.
To approve,
The
yes.
minutes?
With
Yeah.
the amendment, yes.
Yes.
Ms. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Hallett?
Yeah.
Mr. Brzezinski?
I just have one question about the minutes. It's December. How come we're looking at meetings from June and not from November?
I got behind.
They come up when they come up, you know. It's
They
not-
don't come up, right? Did you say, Kim, what?
I
It-
got behind.
Okay.
I'm actually, next meeting, you'll be all caught up.
Okay. Okay,
I didn't know who was taking the minutes or how that was working, so you guys aren't busy enough.
Kim, take, okay. Okay, can we continue?
Mr. Brzezinski
Yes.
and Mr. Spreckler?
Yes. That being done. Quasi-judicial?
If you want, since there's no members of the public here, we can dispense with the quasi-judicial announcement, but we can still do the swearing in of our speakers.
Okay,
that
but
all- is that all right?
Before we go any further, because I know this came up before, I'm not a real fan of the applicant not being here, or at least having a representative. And I think I mentioned that at another meeting, and I was too late because we already started talking. Can I make a motion to not hear this because no one's here? How are we gonna ask any questions?
That's fine. Technically, under your rules, they're not required to be here.
I understand that.
But they do have the burden of proof, technically, not the city. So if you do want to continue it for the applicant to be present here in January, that's fine, we can do that. That's up to the board.
Well, that's my opinion, but I don't know about anybody else's.
Okay,
So would I make a motion
Yeah.
to what?
Continue it to, what's the date for
Continue.
the January hearing?
Or to a later meeting?
because-
January 8th would be,
because that did hurt us one time.
so
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
the motion?
when that,
Especially this one
Right.
with an after-the-fact thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so here is the deal with continuances. So when you make the motion, you have to do the date certain, which is January 8th, and then the time, so 6:30 PM. So make sure you make the motion to continue it to both. That way it doesn't need to be re-advertised.
Okay, then I make a motion that application number 23-140 be continued to the January 6th, did you say?
8th.
8th meeting at 6:30?
PM.
I'll second that.
Who was the second, Ms. Danoff?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we discuss that?
Of
yeah,
course,
we
of
can.
course.
We need a second, though.
I seconded
She
it.
seconded it.
Okay, okay.
May I be heard for a second?
Huh?
I
Sure.
did text him, and he said he apologized because he was mixed up about that he was supposed to be here.
Okay.
Kim, I can't hear you.
So-
Do you have
so
a
he's-
microphone?
Oh, yes. I texted the applicant. I actually just texted him a little bit ago. And he said that he was mixed up about having to be here. So he apologized and asked if we could postpone it.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
And I just have one question about this. Haven't we talked about 439 East Lemon Street a couple times? It seems, okay, just want to make sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'd like to discuss this a little bit more too.
Yeah,
Okay,
discuss.
okay?
Because this was a total overhaul, this property. I remember
Yeah.
when we approved it last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just a walkway, more or less,
It is a
isn't it?
walkway, and frankly, I saw those pictures before.
So
and I-
I'm going to stop you guys right here. If you're going to continue it to the next hearing, then you shouldn't be discussing like the facts of the case and the property. You can discuss at this time whether or not you want to continue it for the applicant to be present, but you can't discuss the actual underlying issues with the house, the property, or the case.
Okay,
Okay?
All I meant was it seems like a minor case.
well, it's, I
because
remember at least
the- 'cause-
two times people weren't here and it hurt them. You know, it probably would have been better if we had held off until they showed up.
And staff recommends approval. I just
Oh, I know.
trying to save us later. But if you guys want to do
Okay.
that, y'all can go ahead and do it.
Well, we got some questions too.
Look, normally I would agree if it was something crazy.
Yeah, it is just a walk.
I would 100% agree if it was something different. Okay,
Okay.
whatever you guys want to do.
Any more discussion on this? Okay, now, it's for continuance. Yes will be continued, no will not be.
Right.
Okay. Okay, roll call?
Ms. Denoff?
Yes.
Ms. Hallett?
Yes.
Ms. Ryan?
No.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mr. Sprecher?
Yes. Okay. Let's go back through here. Okay, I guess we go on to what we're, this other thing we gotta do,
Yes,
okay? Because there's no more,
okay.
This is
Okay,
done.
good evening. Pat McNeese, Planning Supervisor. It's nice to see you all again. Haven't seen you in a while. I'm here this evening to present the final draft of the Adaptation and Resiliency Plan for Greektown and the Historic District. I think most of you were on the board when this was being developed. It's been a little while. When we were working on this, we had a couple workshops here. We had a goals workshop, in particular here at one of your meetings in 2022, actually. So the project has been completed, and it's in final draft form. We've taken it to the Sustainability Advisory Committee. We'd like you all to get a look at it, and hopefully we'll be sending this final version up to the state soon. I've passed out a hard copy for you to look at. I'm going to ask for those back, if I could have those back at the end of the meeting. There will be digital online. This is the draft, but I'm using those for people to be able to follow through with the presentation. I hope you're okay that they're in recycled binders, so that's why the weird binders. So if you remember this project, this was done with a grant from the Department of Historic Resources at State of Florida, and it was for an adaptation and resiliency plan for the historic district in Greektown. Basically, the study did an assessment of all the historic assets, so those would be the structures and buildings and sites in the historic district and in the Greektown district. And we characterized the primary hazards, which are wind and water. I'll go through those a little more in a minute. we characterized the risk exposure of these assets. So that was the main thrust of the study, was to look at what the exposure was by geographic area, building typology, and those types of things. And then we did quite a bit of work describing the framework that this plan operates under. There's a lot of effort going on at the state, regional, county, and local, other local areas with respect to adaptation, mostly related to flooding and sea level rise. So there's quite a bit of information in this report about all those programs, grants, projects, studies, those types of things. And then we had community engagement with this, as you all are aware. There is a section with a plan that has visions, and vision statement, and then goals, objectives, and action items. And then we did a whole section on adaptation and resiliency tools specific to historic properties using federal guidance. We'll take a look at that. And then we have appendices in the document with a lot of different information. The only thing missing from what's in front of you is the asset spreadsheets. Those are probably about 100 pages by itself, individual listing of all the assets, how they scored, what their vulnerability is, that sort of thing. So that will, I mean, that's in the final document. I just didn't print it. It's a lot of paper. And as you all are aware, so you have the historic district here, which includes that National Register downtown district and your local district. That's the area that you all have purview over when you're reviewing projects. The Greektown district, which overlaps a little bit with your area, goes up, includes most of the sponge docks up here. That's a national cultural district that's a cultural property. So that's nationally designated, but it's not locally designated at this time. The Board of Commissioners, when we got this grant, started this study, asked us to take a kind of a cursory look at Union Academy. And we did do that in the study, came up with some basic findings. But I think Caroline has talked to you about the survey that was being done for Union Academy. That was just completed. I think it's in final draft form. So there is survey work being done over there. It wasn't part of this study. It was recommended, but she had gotten that grant and that was already underway. So that's being done now. So part one of the document is the community descriptions. And like I said, Greektown is a traditional cultural property, and then we have our Tarpon Historic District and the Union Academy neighborhood. We primarily have wood, frame, and masonry structures in these areas, residential and non-residential structures. And as you know, contributing and non-contributing structures. The Greektown District has those designations as well. Contributing can be with respect to architecture, culture, or both. So it doesn't have to be 50 years old in Greektown. There are some newer structures that are contributing in that designation. Part two of the document has the hazard profiles, and those are high water events and high wind events. High water events, we included rainfall and nuisance flooding, so that sunny day tidal flooding that we see at some areas around the city already. And then storm surge flooding from hurricanes, cold fronts, and those types of things. And then we have long-term sea level rise that we looked at. Everybody in Tarpon Springs is pretty much in the same windborne debris region, wind region for wind impacts, so we looked at that as well for this study. There is, in part two, there's a fold-out table that has a lot of pretty much most of the related programs that are going on, action plans, our own sustainability plan, the strategic plan, everything from that to our seawall master plan, things like that going on at state, regional, county, and city levels. So that's just a summary of that. What aspects they address, and they pretty much all address water, flooding or sea level rise. How they relate to different areas of the historic district, whether they cover those areas or that, and the entities involved. So that's kind of a summary table of that. Part 3 is kind of the main thrust of the message here, which is the risk exposure. So these are just 2 tables from that section. There's more extensive information in there. Basically, we have 58% of our structures in Greektown and Historic District are in that 100-year floodplain, the AE flood zones. And another 14% are in the 500-year floodplain, which is the X zone, and then the rest are outside the floodplain. All told, we have 351 structures in the 100-year floodplain. And I should have mentioned at the outset, so this study analyzed everything built before 1976. Right now, you all review only properties and structures that were built in 1959 or before, because that's the last time you did your survey. This study covered 1976 because that's about the time the National Flood Insurance Program began in earnest in communities. So this is also coordinated with the county. The county's doing a county-wide study of this, and we are kind of coordinating and going along with what they're doing to try to coordinate this into a big database. You can imagine there's a lot of pre-1976 structures in the entire county, so it's a substantial amount of information. So 351 structures, and then of those, right now, 293 are designated contributing or contributing altered in your historic district and in Greektown that are in the 100-year floodplain. So this just illustrates a couple of the maps. This is the coastal high hazard area. About half of the pre-1976 structures are in it. The coastal high hazard area is the Category 1, the modeled Category 1 storm surge. And I like this map. It's updated every 4 or 5 years. And it's pretty darn accurate if you look at where you get flooding and hurricanes. This is really kind of like an almost direct hit of a Category 1 surge modeled, but it really is a good coverage for multiple hurricane scenarios. And then this just shows the 100-year and 500-year floodplain for Greektown and for the historic district. So you can see some of the areas, obviously the sponge docks is in that flood area, the fruit, what people refer to as the fruit salad area, very much in that area. And there are other maps in the document. This is just an example of a location a lot of people are familiar with at Canal and Roosevelt, or Canal, and then over here's Park Street. Of sunny day flooding. This was taken in June on a full moon tide, in the middle of the day, the sun's out. And this kind of shows about where that location was. This is on the 1883 plat map. That's why it's a little fuzzy, because I tried to blow it up. Kind of shows what was there before. A couple of lakes, some wetlands. We had a lot of dredge and fill activity. You've got the canal is over here behind these houses. It now dead ends in this road. So when you get a high tide, these waters are coming up from the storm sewer. But it kind of shows why we have these problems and are looking at doing some city actions to try to minimize them. Water pretty much wants to go where it used to go, and dirt wants to go back where it used to be, is kind of the rule of thumb you always observe over time. Same thing with the fruit salad area. Previous wetlands and submerged lands filled and bulkheaded. And a lot of the fruit salad area is probably about under 4 feet elevation above sea level. So that's what we're looking at there. So we did look at neighborhood level impact in addition to individual structures. With respect to wind, all 602 resources evaluated are vulnerable to high sustained winds. And the 2 takeaways on that in the report, biggest ones are the structural strengthening, lateral load, and the vertical load and tie-in to the foundation. And then openings in the structure. So you guys get, and I've got it in here, I want to say almost, I think, a quarter to a third of your requests since about 2009 for certificates of approval are for replacement of wood windows with vinyl or replacement of windows in some form and doors. So you get a lot of that. Shutter systems are recommended. Sometimes it's hard to convince people to do shutters instead of doing those hurricane windows, but that's really the best way to protect the structure.
Did you see that again, Pat? The windows are the best way, or these
Well,
shutters?
we're recommending shutters for a couple reasons. So impact-resistant windows, and I know they get better all the time. I sometimes argue with window people about this, but they are not impact-proof. A hard shutter is something that, obviously in a Category 5, there, with windborne debris is like missiles. There's 2 things really, missiles. So something that impacts a structure or a surface, and then other things like you've all seen it or seen pictures, like a metal roof or an aluminum roof that comes off, wraps itself around a building or a tree. That's another kind of example of a larger windborne thing, a shed or something, that could be windborne. Those types of things, impacting a structure, the general feeling is that a shutter is going to provide a better first line of defense than just the window. And I'm sure windows will keep getting better, and that'll continue to be debated. I put plywood shutters on my house. I never trust windows, but I've been through a couple of hurricanes. But community engagement, we had a lot of interest in this. We had a real good workshop over at the community center. I had about 40 people attend, and we got 50 responses to our survey. All that is in the report, and good feedback on what historic assets people felt were important. Probably one of the very important things we got out of this was critical assets. So the Resilient Florida Act that was passed in 2021, that's the program that the state designated. It started out to be up to $100 million. Now it's at least $100 million a year towards resiliency and adaptation projects. The city has applied each year since then for city infrastructure projects in that program. And the city is currently undergoing a vulnerability assessment that's required by the program. That's in the table in here. But one of the things in there is critical assets. So it is what you would expect: infrastructure, your fire stations, your different critical things to the city. But it also lists critical historical and cultural assets. So that is a class that is eligible for protection under that act. So one of the things, but it's not specifically defined. There's been some, there's still in rulemaking on some of this, and or some people are kind of sitting around waiting for them to define it. So we did not wait. We went ahead and defined our own critical assets based on community input, whether it's city-owned, what its historic district status is, or whether it's actually publicly owned, and what its status is, local or national. So with that, we came up with both districts. The public said that those were very important to them, the Greektown and local historic district. They also called out the sponge docks in particular, the commercial sponge docks down on Dodecanese and in Craig Park as two very important assets. The Union Academy Family Center is in the 100-year floodplain and is city-owned, so we called that one out as well. The rest of the city-owned resources, believe it or not, most of them are not in a flood zone. This building, the Cultural Center, the waterworks on Gross Avenue, Safford House, they're all on high ground. So I didn't realize that till we did this, so that's pretty good. I don't know if they planned it that way or if we just lucked out. So that'll be important as we go forward and apply for that funding. We can now say, hey, we have a study, we've heard from the community, these are our critical historical assets. So we did also develop goals, objectives, and action items. So there are 4 goals, and the objectives and action items in the plan, and a vision statement as well. And then there's a section on adaptation. So we used the Secretary's standards for rehabilitating historic buildings, which is a really nice publication. They just updated it a couple of years ago, very nice, well illustrated, and it goes through all these different methods of adapting property. And just a couple just to show you, but this is all in the document. For example, the temporary measures, in addition to sandbags, which aren't really a structural thing you can do. You're just putting sandbags, those types of things. But flood wraps and panels, door panels, are one way you can protect a building. Landscape and site adaptations for protecting underground infrastructure and above ground, and trying to retard or retain water before it gets to your structure. There could be some neighborhood solutions where you use those site walls. You've got a lot of site walls around still where you can use floodgates and those types of things. And this obviously is not going to stop a big surge, but something like we just had with Adalia, some of these big rain events, those types of things, it's going to at least retard the water, keep it in the street, and just kind of take up some of that slack before it can get to the structure. Elevating a building. This building is elevated above grade with pretty nice foundation, kind of obscured by landscaping, low-rise steps. That's a nice job. This building, this is the Edward Jones building on North Safford, was moved from where the Walmart is, not Walmart, Walgreens drugstore. Yeah, it was moved out of a flood zone. I don't think that was the purpose. I think it was just to make way for the Walgreens. But they did a very nice job. It's not in a flood zone anymore, but they did some lattice, again, low-rise steps and landscaping. We looked at long-term sea level rise as required by Resilient Florida Act, and we looked at the scenarios that they specify in the act. And this is just a quick show of 2 and 3 feet sea level rise As you can see, a lot of the fruit salad area is in there in the historic district. We're looking at potentially 2.5 to 3.5 feet of sea level rise by 2080. So what they're showing you is on the higher of the 2 daily tides where you might expect water inundation with the elevations and conditions we have today. So some whole neighborhood adaptation approaches are being considered, and those are also discussed in there. The city is looking at, and recently had a presentation on armoring or doing some kind of system around Whitcomb Bayou over the longer term to adapt to sea level rise. Also, just to touch base, you might be aware, the Sponge Docks is in the process of a 3-phase system. We have backflow prevention valves in, and they're about to revamp the drainage infrastructure at the 3 or 4 intersections they're looking at, and then there will be also vaulting of stormwater down there. So there's a program going on for that as well. For Union Academy, we had 346 built parcels, only 18% in the 100-year floodplain. The dark ones built before 1945, and then several built before 1976 as well. And again, there's a survey that's just being wrapped up on that. Probably the main concern, or one of my concerns with Union Academy, is what you might call climate gentrification, or maybe even flood zone gentrification, I'm not sure. But as sea level rise increases and flood insurance gets more expensive, these parcels are going to look more and more attractive. So you're going to lose some of your older homes to newer homes. And property being bought up in this neighborhood is kind of what one thing that we might expect and really are kind of already seeing on some level. Okay, and that completes the presentation. I did, after I completed this, I did add the final damage assessment from Idalia since the county finalized that. So Idalia was about 130 miles offshore. It was Category 3, moving at 18 miles per hour. So a nice, fast clip, pretty fast clip, which was good for us. And then what happens is that day or the next day after we get out of the EOC, we do damage assessment, immediate damage assessment, only residential structures. We don't do commercial structures. And this is the results in the historic district in Greektown of that damage assessment. So we had 7 with major damage, 35 with minor, and 5 affected. That just shows what those terms mean to FEMA. And I just overlaid the coastal high hazard area so you can see this was an offshore storm, so it was not a direct hit, but it was a Category 3. It acted just the way we expected a storm. You get that surge. The sustained wind keeps the water up, 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 up until it's gone by, and then it goes down. When we were in the EOC, the Sponge Docks camera went out, but the Craig Park camera worked the entire time, and there was a barricade there. Was there for just close the sidewalk off, but we were glad it was there because we could watch the water come up, and went over the barricade, and then after a little bit, it started to go down. So that's exactly what you would expect for storm behavior on that. So 47 structures in all in the historic district were identified. This document also refers to, and I wanted to remind you that you do have in your guidelines flood adaptation, a lot of good information on adapting and rehabbing your structure, moving it, elevating it, that kind of thing in here already. And this The study should help with that, to provide people some details on how to do that. So with that, I would like to find out if you have any questions or comments on the study.
Good presentation.
Okay,
Quick question. Where can we find this online?
okay,
Alice,
I will be posting it online probably in the next week or so. I need to send it up to the state, and I'm not sure what the exact next step is. I think it will go to the Board of Commissioners, but we'll probably just post it as a draft. I'm just not sure in what form it's going to them, whether we're going to attach it to the comprehensive plan or what we'll do with it. That hasn't been decided.
So, this would be my question, if that's okay.
oh yeah.
Are you looking for them to recommend that the Board of Commissioners accepts and approves of this? Or are you just presenting it for informational purposes to them?
I would like to get comments from them.
Okay.
If you do want to recommend to the board, then that would be fine. Make a recommendation to the board, they can.
I did take a look at the ordinance that establishes the board, and they can make those types of recommendations to the Board of Commissioners as it concerns all of this.
Okay.
So I would recommend that even if they're only taking comments today, or if you want to have them do it at their next meeting, but for them to do that before you bring it to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. And like I said, I'm not sure exactly what form. You're going to be looking at your historic element next, so it may be related to that, how it goes forward. But, we can let you know. And in the meantime, yeah, if any of you do have comments or questions on this, you can email me or Caroline, and we'll be glad to take those if you want to do that. If you want to take one of these hard copies with you, feel free to do so. It's just not the final, and I'm just using them for, people to look at while we did too many PowerPoints. So you want
I'd
something
like
to
to
look
hold
at.
on to this one and take a good hard look at it, tell you the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to too.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comments or any others? What I would suggest is, give us about a month. Next meeting, we can visit this again.
Sure.
And, if we have any comments, we can make a formal. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So what is the next step? Where is this going?
The reason I'm hesitant is because I haven't gotten a clear directive from my planning director, but it will go to the Board of Commissioners in some form. It should. The main thing for me is to send it to the state of Florida to finish the grant. It does not have to be adopted to finish the grant. That was not a requirement, so we will be sending it to them. It just had to be completed, the study. So I can let you know what exactly the next step is once I know.
One of the things that you may look at is how your regulations interplay with this and what you look at when you look at your regulations, like you had brought up the windows earlier. Do you want to amend your code to talk about those types of storm risk factors as they relate to your role in issuing certificates of approval? You can kind of do that. We had discussed previously too, something similar with solar panels. So this board does have that ability to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners for changes to your ordinances and land development code that affect your historic district, and also to the comprehensive plan. You will have that ability and authority under your establishment as well.
I have a question. If this is all approved, then would there be grants available to people that want to make these changes?
Well,
Like right on Donnacona, let's say, or?
one of the action items in this study is to consider trying to develop some grant programs. There are There are Greektown and Building Code Assistant grants available now. One thing about contributing structures is they are exempt, and that's explained in here too. They are exempt from the FEMA substantial improvement, the 50% rule, as people call it. And you guys might know that from the current historic district, same with Greektown. So they are exempt, so they can keep that historic integrity of the buildings. But yeah, that is one of the items, is to try to develop some grant programs.
And that would be for the businesses, but would it be for the homes as well?
I think both, we'd look at both, especially some of the elderly people who can't keep up their older homes, you know, maybe fixed income, those types of, you know, grants to help that.
The other question I have is I only see one place in here where it talks about the cemetery, and that's at the end with the tables, and we don't have the tables yet. Is there anywhere else where you address the cemeteries or mitigation of cemetery lands if there's flooding there?
Well, the cemetery is listed as a city asset. We did analyze wind and flood impacts. That's all we did on those. Both of the Cicadia Cemetery and Rose Hill Cemetery are pretty much out of the flood zone. They pretty much aren't wind impacted, you know, so that's as far as we went, was just to list them with the assets. And we didn't discuss them anymore after that because they weren't, no significant impact there.
And they're located very far away, or at least Cicadia is, from your historic district and from Greektown. Do they bear that designation, since, I mean, you do have antebellum graves there?
Both of those have National Register
National
designations individually.
Okay,
They're not in a historic district.
okay.
And do they overlap? I think there was like a question about the historical district and the Greektown district overlapping on some streets, and people
Yeah,
were
they do.
having-
They
And
do.
why does that happen, or, I mean, does it cause confusion? I know it did with that one meeting. We were
Yeah, well, the Greektown district was a national, this is the Greektown district in the dotted line. That was a national register cultural property that was nominated and developed by an individual. And she overlapped it with the current historic district.
It doesn't make any confusion on our part or
I
Well-
think,
on the residents. The residents seem confused by it, but.
Yeah.
well, I
right.
think, a lot of districts can overlap and it can get confusing, but I think the important thing to note is that properties can have multiple significance. So a property might be appropriate to be in our local or National Register Historic District, but it also might have ties to the Greek community and therefore is also significant to.
So the decision would be made based on the situation or the historical building or?
I believe, how it played out was, things were already in either the local or national district, and then this Greektown district was overlaid on top of it.
I just wanted to bring it up in case
Yeah.
anybody's watching.
And the Greektown district, really, if you read that, and there are links to that nomination, it really was heavily on the cultural part. So there's buildings from the 2000s that are contributing because they are important to the Greek culture. So that's why that boundary was made, and that's why that's what that evaluation was based on. Yeah. So, anything else?
Okay, anything else?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, continuing on.
Okay.
Staff, do you have any more comments?
Yes, we're going to move on to our review of the historic and cultural resources element of the comprehensive plan that was in your packet. There were 3 things in your packet. There's a 2-page outline showing how it was reorganized. And then there's a 3-page of the revised element, and then at the end was supposed to be a strike-through underline table of the historic element, but you ended up with the housing element. So I'm gonna pass out, which is okay, because the strike-through underline, I really don't want to focus on that. I'd like to focus on this 3-page document, the new proposed revised draft. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass out the strike-through underline in case we have any questions on it.
I was wondering, because that last table didn't make much sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we've been doing several of these with our planning and zoning board, and we found kind of the most effective way to do it would be to start with the goal 1, objective 1, and have you just read through it yourself. And if you have any questions or comments on that, we'll go ahead and move on to objective 1, 2, et cetera. So,
Okay, now, this is not the one that you gave us, then.
well, you can, the same thing is on there, except it's in strike-through underline in that center column. But you could read it there.
Okay.
But on this 3-page that was in your packet, it starts with historic and cultural resources, goals, objectives, and policies in blue at the top. So the first goal is to identify, preserve, and protect architectural, historical, cultural, and archaeological resources. That's what we're looking for.
Hey, Carolyn,
Yes.
I've got a sinus infection. I don't think I'm gonna make it through this whole meeting.
Okay,
I'm not feeling great.
understand.
All right, I apologize.
Okay. You're not feeling good,
All
you're
right,
not feeling
thanks,
good.
guys.
Hope you
Thanks.
feel better.
If you want to take a look at it, if you have any comments, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it with me. Thanks.
So the first objective would be to update historic, archaeological, cultural resources surveys, ordinance guidelines, and databases, and then there's 6 policies underneath that.
Okay.
We'll let you read through that for a minute, and if anybody has any comments on those, we'll talk through them.
I'm still not seeing what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do
Do you have,
I pulled off my information from the internet.
okay, do you,
Is that gonna be different than the packet?
did you print your, do you have,
I printed,
okay.
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
I didn't either.
that's in here?
Yeah.
There you go, right there.
Yeah.
I don't have one.
Actually, that's got a whole
Oh,
thing here.
good, thank you.
Yeah, that didn't
Okay,
come through.
okay, she got one there.
Yeah.
Now, where was this?
So is it the end of the packet?
Oh, this is,
So I should have it here?
You should.
okay.
So it's
It should be before that,
before
I
this.
think so.
Okay, let's see here.
Okay, yeah, there. Yep,
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you.
I didn't catch that.
Okay, I
Oh.
see it.
So
Oh,
there's
sorry.
only 2
Thanks.
goals,
Yes.
the major goals here, okay.
Two overarching, well, actually,
I have
yes,
it right
no,
there.
3. There's 3.
Where's the
It
third?
was
So
just,
the very last, it's more related
it
to
was just before.
public art.
Oh, I see, okay, there.
So
it is.
that is
Yeah.
one minor adjustment. It's, we've calling it
that's
the
what she's
historic and cultural resources element instead of just the historic element.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the updates right here that you have in this chart.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I got you now. Going with that,
I will note, in policy 1.13, the very last line, it says certificate of appropriateness process, and I know we have used the term certificate of approval, but most historic districts use a certificate of appropriateness,
Yeah.
so that's a suggested change we're
I
making.
think it makes more sense, actually.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments on that objective 1.1 and the associated policies?
Mhm.
Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to objective 1.2, to increase the number of designated historic and cultural resources to increase protection against demolition of significant sites throughout the city.
On policy 1.2.1, it looks like you have in the repeated twice there.
Do, we do.
Yeah.
We do, we do. Everybody comfortable with moving on to 1.3?
Mhm.
Increase the number of historic districts in the city and apply context-sensitive guidelines for preservation. I've gotten a comment from my director on this. We want to probably include a policy that's specifically related to something like neighborhood conservation overlay districts. For areas like Greektown and Union Academy, where maybe a full historic district with the rigors of having to come to see you guys for every little change may not be appropriate. That's what I was trying to get at with the context-sensitive guidelines, but maybe a policy that's more specific about neighborhood conservation. So do we have any questions on 1.3? Okay, let's move on to 1.4, to preserve historic, archaeological, cultural, and architectural resources. Is everybody feeling comfortable with objective 1.4?
Mhm.
All right, let's move on to 1.5, protect archaeological sites through the land development, should say the land development code.
Do you all have a land development code provision that allows for density transfers?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do they mean by require mitigation in 1.5.2? What,
So usually mitigation for archaeological sites involves retrieval of artifacts and curation of
All right.
artifacts, if appropriate. Is everybody comfortable with moving on to 1.6?
Mhm.
We're gonna preserve historic and architectural resources by integrating historic preservation into local emergency management.
Are you going to change that certificate of approval to certificate of appropriateness? Does that apply here?
Yeah, if everybody feels comfortable with changing to an appropriateness, I'd like to do that globally.
I like that word personally. I think it says more.
Are you looking to update that in your ordinances as
If
well? Okay.
Following the.
All right, yeah, yeah, okay.
Comfortable moving on to 1.7?
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to provide incentives and programs to encourage the protection and restoration of significant historic resources.
Okay, why would we just want to consider implementation instead of just implementing?
Because
can
I
you?
am not a policy maker, I am an advisor. So if we get direction to implement it, but we would bring this in front of our board to ask them to consider implementation.
Okay.
Particularly with budgetary considerations, a lot of time you want it to be considered, because if the city offers grant programs, that's, you know, something that they have to
I
budget
just always
for.
look at that as sort of a kick
Yeah,
the can
yeah.
kind of thing. All right. I understand though.
And if everybody's comfortable moving on to goal 2, to increase public awareness and education of the historic preservation process.
I think this one is really important when people are coming in and buying a home, like some of the people that come in, they don't even know they're in the historic district and what that means, and they could know that ahead of time.
And I know we've actually discussed before doing a mail out, and we have received approval to do that at
To do
some
a
point,
what?
to start doing an annual postcard mail out to
Yeah.
everyone in the historic district, letting them know.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, what about this develop and maintain list of historic properties threatened by demolition?
Demolition through neglect. So those properties that we're seeing just being neglected, it's saying we should probably keep an eye on those properties and take code enforcement action or whatever to prevent them from
Okay,
being.
who would be maintaining that? Who?
The
Would it
city,
be you guys?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just like to make more work for myself.
Oh. need a big stick. Okay.
Does everybody feel comfortable moving on to 2.2?
Just some clarification.
Sure.
To 1.2 about the threatened properties.
Mhm.
I'm aware of that new statute or whatever it is that I, editorial comment, totally do not agree with, about being able to, like if I was walking down the street and I saw a house falling down, if I wanted to call code enforcement, I have to give my name, my phone number, my address and everything. I know that that's a law or whatever. Like I said, I do not agree with that, but that's not relevant. Who is going to be deciding, and how are we gonna decide if something is neglected legally? Who's gonna do that? Because right now, no one's doing it. I don't think.
No, I don't think anybody is.
Would that be something that could be brought before a board?
Usually that's something that is brought through code enforcement, and it involves inspections by a professional that can make those types of determinations. So someone like your building official or people who do those types of inspections for a living to determine whether or not the structure is sound or safe, because
Should be condemned.
right, that's basically what you're doing, is you're saying that this building is not habitable because it's at risk of either collapsing on the inhabitants or collapsing on a neighboring property.
Yeah, and I understand that, but how do we get to that point where an inspector comes in to look at it?
In some cases, the city can seek what's called an inspection warrant, and that's actually a court process and a court proceeding, where there's enough evidence from the outside of the property that it's a hazardous property or hazard to what's around it, that we can seek to do an interior inspection and get a court order to perform that type of an inspection.
Okay, I understand that. I'm still asking, how does it get to, who's gonna say that that building, is it going to have to be someone in code enforcement that just happens to be driving down the street seeing it? Or can we, anyone here, if we see something but don't want to leave our name and number? You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I understand where you're going, and no, because of the way that that statute reads, that's not an option anymore. A lot of times it was at an option of a city as to whether or not they wanted to accept anonymous code enforcement complaints. I would say most code enforcement has become more reactive than proactive. When I first started doing this kind of work, you did have code enforcement that would patrol neighborhoods and, look for different things. And what happened in the case law is that they started filing Section 1983 claims, claiming that some of that was selective enforcement. So that created a reaction where now more and more code enforcement departments will only take complaint-driven investigations or undertake complaint-driven investigations.
So even though, I lost it, whatever one we were talking about,
The demolition,
the demolition.
yeah.
So even though we're talking about having that as sort of a thing, it really may never happen. I mean, if you really look at it, it may never happen. And these buildings may just crumble and fall in.
I do believe in the past you have had demolition by neglect cases. What I will say is a lot of times what happens is a developer comes in and buys a property that's derelict, and rather than taking the time to bring it up to par, it's easier and cheaper just to tear it down. And unfortunately, that's kind of like what you see.
No, we've had that here.
And this board has prevented them, so.
Okay.
So something like that would come in front of us.
Yes, if it's a
Before they could
historic
tear it
property.
down.
Yes.
Yeah,
Alright.
so then-
So I feel that this would be more of a, working with code enforcement, like making sure that code enforcement flags any code enforcement issues within the historic district, that it comes to attention, gets on a list that you guys are aware of. That's kind of how I was thinking about it, before it gets to the point of something falling in on itself, needing to be demolished, but code enforcement actions getting flagged in the historic district and maintaining a list, kind of thing.
Okay.
But if a home or a building is so bad that it's dangerous, like what if kids go in there and get hurt? Why wouldn't you want to just give your name? I mean, wouldn't you just give your?
Certainly in extreme cases, yeah, but
Yeah.
the way it's written for anything, you can't, I mean, you have to leave your name and number for anything. And there's other reasons
Yeah.
why people would not want to do that, okay? But I understand what you're saying.
Okay, let's move on to 2.2, to develop a program to promote historic and cultural tourism as part of the asset-based economic strategy. I really only have one policy associated with that, so, the third goal is to recognize the diversity of cultural traditions and foster artistic expression to enrich quality of life for residents and visitors. And this goal is, again, more of the broader cultural. All right, well, if we don't have any questions or comments on that, we're certainly, this is getting towards a final draft, but it's certainly not final, so if you take a look at it later, think of something else.
Yeah. So what we just went through relates to this too, right?
So what that table is, it has on the first column, it's what the current language is, and then the middle shows you the strike through underline, and then the third column kind of tells you what the thought process behind it was.
Okay. And so I just have a real quick question about that. In the current language, pretty much on all of these, it says the city of Tarpon Springs shall. Now, I know the difference between shall and may. In the proposed language, shall was taken out. Is shall implied? Is it negotiable?
I'm actually gonna let the attorney address that.
It was sort of a question for the attorney.
Right. So, a lot of the comprehensive plan is supposed to be your outline, right? And then your land development code and your code of ordinances, that's where you actually are supposed to see a lot of the shalls. So I think as they worked through this with the consultant, they kind of tried to intentionally try and soften some of that language. to kind of widen the breadth and scope of your application, especially where you might have competing policies. Because that's not unusual, you know, there's different things that you have to consider a lot of times in land development. So by relaxing some of that language and not making it so mandatory, it's more appropriate for your comprehensive plan.
So then it's sort of negotiable.
Right,
Okay,
right.
all right.
I
Thank you.
wouldn't say that it's totally negotiable.
It's not totally.
Well, not
I would
totally,
say
but, I
your
mean,
your
it almost
comprehensive
sounds that
plan-
way, but I get it.
Your comprehensive plan is supposed to be more of a policy document, and your
Yeah.
land development code is what regulates it. That's the law.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, thank you for
Okay.
taking the time on that with me.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yep,
Good
we're-
stuff.
Oh,
We're going
well
through that.
done.
Okay, board, you got any comments? Got any comments? Get ready to close.
I gave enough comments.
Okay, it is 7:41. Calling this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Once again, good job.
Sorry,
Good
I
job.
hit the wrong. You want these
I have
back,
to
right,
go home,
Pat?
Actually, I
Pat
have
wants
somebody
these.
coming real early in the morning, and, so I can't.
got two.
I'm gonna have to go.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Next time for sure,
Okay.
if not sooner.
How about
Oh,
this, do
whoa,
you want this,
one
because
thing I
it's
wanted
already in
to
here?
say is, not Merry Christmas, yeah. But anyhow, January, we're voting on a new chairman.